Okay, hello. We'll talk now about Rob Krier on this day of the 10th of June, 2023. Let's read a little bit about him. Rob Krier, born in 1938, and he was born, as far as I know, on June 10th, and that's the reason we talk about him today. He's a Luxembourgian sculptor, architect, urban designer, and theorist. He's former professor of architecture at Vienna University of Technology in Austria. From 1993 to mid-2010, he worked in partnership with architect Christoph Koell in a joint office based in Berlin in Germany. He's the older brother of fellow architect Leon Krier. Both are well-known representatives of new urbanism and new classical architecture. This kind of sounds a little bit strange, new classical architecture. But let's see what Rob Krier is about. Krier studied architecture at the Technical University of Munich from 1959 to 1964. After graduation, as opposed to his brother Leon Krier, who refused to graduate and left school early. So Rob Krier did graduate in Munich in 1964. And after graduation, he worked with Oswald Matthias Ungers, a very important architect in Germany, in Cologne and Berlin, and Frei Otto in Berlin and Stuttgart from 1967 to 1970. You wouldn't expect this, you know, that Rob Krier worked with Frei Otto, because there aren't any you know, architectonic resemblances between his work and the work of Frei Otto. We talked about Frei Otto some days ago. From 1973 to 1975, he was an assistant in the School of Architecture at the University of Stuttgart. I think the very school which his brother Leon Krier left after 1 or 2 years, I think 1 year. Anyway, in 1975, he was guest professor at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, ETH, an excellent school in Switzerland. From 1976 to 1998, he was professor of architecture at the Vienna University of Technology. Quite a long time, 22 years. And it's a little bit surprising, because you'd expect a University of Technology to have a different approach to architecture than his own. In addition, in 1996, he was a guest professor at Yale University in the United States. From 1976 and 1994, Krier had his own architect's office in Vienna. From 1992 to 2004, he ran a joint office with Nicolas Buntel in Montpellier, France. In 1993, he also founded a joint office with Christoph Koell in Berlin, most recently incorporated as Krier Koell. Since 2010, the renamed has been backed by Rob Krier, a senior advisor. Krier first came to international attention with his 1975 book, Stadtraum, which was translated into English under the title Urban Space in 1979. So, you know, 45 years ago, reprinted as Urban Space in 2005. Krier contributed theoretically and practically to several key projects, including Ritterstrasse, the Rauchstrasse in Berlin, then this work in Vienna, and another work in Potsdam. He was, I would say, I knew him from that time, and I mean, I knew his work, and I was attracted by his way of drawing, which was very, you know, at that time, very appealing. And we are going to, now he doesn't quite look here maybe as a sculptor and as an artist, but maybe not. Why not? Why shouldn't an artist look so stubbornly, you know, bourgeois? Here he is with his brother Leon Krier in the foreground, and Rob Krier, you know, the one on the right. As I mentioned, Leon Krier, you know, a darling of the newly elected King of Great Britain, King Charles. previously known as Prince Charles. Drawings, and his drawings are indeed inspiring and lyrical and dreamlike, but I would say his buildings are a little bit less so. Maybe these studies for a corner building, you know, they are variations of a theme, although they did influence me at one time. This is the magazine architectural monograph published in Great Britain. The cover of the magazine dedicated to Rob Krier, Architecture and Urban Design. I like this drawing, although the building, and he did build it in Germany, in Berlin, is maybe less, a little bit less poetical. We are going to see it. Elements of architecture, Rob Krier, architectural design. Like his brother, Leon Krier, Rob Krier was very interested in the urban tissue and in urbanism in general. But he advocated an urbanism of sensitivity. You don't see here any highway or street, and you do not see cars. You only see, you know, poetical renderings of poetical buildings, some human silhouettes, but you don't see the paraphernalia of, you know, the so-called civilized modern way of life, actually. And the seductions of his drawn work, I guess, derive in part exactly from this, from the idealization of architecture, ignoring in good measure, you know, the dust and pollution and noise of modern life. This is a cartoon of him, and because he is still a sculptor and an artist, and he actually built, you know, sculptures similar formally to the sketch that we see here on the right. The problem I have with both Rob Krier and Leon Krier is that they didn't intensify, you know, a sense of modernity without, you know, falling victims to historicism, which in my opinion is questionable. I think the past is very important, especially that past which doesn't pass. The valuable so-called past, which is actually part of a continuum, part of the spiral of time. But there are historicisms in the work of both Leon Krier and Robert Krier or Rob Krier that are problematic. I like the sculpture, and it shows, you know, suffering. It shows, you know, tension. It shows angst. But the buildings are not quite like this. Anyway, his drawings are very nice, and as we can see, I didn't make an analysis in this sense, but I don't think any of his drawings show any kind of car, as if the car does not exist. But I know it does exist, at least for his brother, and you know, his brother built a villa for himself in Florida, where triumphant Ford Taurus was depicted, photographed many times. And maybe Rob Krier uses a car too, but not in his drawings, as if the car does not exist. So what is the level of reality of this architecture? Well, I dislike the cars too, but they exist. They are part of our life. So if you want to, you know, depict architecture as not only as it could be and should be, but also as it is, you cannot neglect it. We just saw the works of Joseph Kuipers, who built things kind of like this. This is a drawing again. You look at the bottom of the drawing, and you wonder, is this our time? Is this our society? Where are the people with the mobile phones? Where are the cars? Where is the maddening publicity without which capitalism succumbs? Where are they? But the drawings, in my opinion, are nice, are, you know, poetical, so to speak. Rob Krier, Urban Space, forward by Colin Rowe. It was nostalgia at the end of the 20th century. We were approaching the end of a millennium, not just a century, and many architects looked backwards for finding some kind of legitimizing certification for their gestures, for their architectonic gestures. Finally, a car, but you see what kind of car. I mean, it's more like a relic, and probably he didn't intend it to, you know, be moving at all. Maybe an abandoned old car. Now, in Berlin, he was invited in the 1980s, I think around 1987, together with many other important architects of that time, to build apartment buildings or houses, housing complexes in Berlin. Berlin did this 3 times during the 20th century, in the 1930s, in the 1950s, and in the 1980s. And I think it was a great idea. So in the present, Berlin has 3 colonies, if we are to call them so, of great buildings by great architects built in the 30s, in the 50s, and in the 80s. He contributed to the International Bau Architecture, I don't know what that P stands for, with this residential complex in Berlin. I actually built, I think, 2 apartment buildings. This one is not too bad. I'm not sure if it's not the same one. Anyway, it is his participation in this international effort to bring interesting and valuable apartment buildings in Berlin. But in those years, 1985, 1987 or so, postmodernism was still king, so to speak. And well, a few years later, deconstructivism replaced it. But at this time, architects were seduced by, you know, historical references, and built accordingly. That sculptural presence there is also, you know, he was the author of it. Should I call it a statue? Should I call it a sculpture? I think the idea to bring sculpture to architecture is a good one, but maybe not like this, just to plant it there, you know, on a little pedestal, you know, but to incorporate it somehow organically into the walls, into the, if I am to say, the fabric of the building. But it's still intriguing. I would say more the sculpture than the building. Rob Krier, Berlin. So yes, it took place in 1987. Yeah, he did build a few, I think, at least 2, if I'm not mistaken. This is another one, a block of flats, an apartment building, not very tall. And he's lucky that the plants adorn the facade. I think without the plants, the building would have been less like here. Here he saved a little bit by the colors, the addition of color, but otherwise the building is, yeah, you could say classicist. But there is a slight asymmetry which creates, you know, a little bit of instability that is beneficial. But without it, Of course, when ivy attacks the building, is all for the better. Here as well. Now I don't know why the ivy only grew on the left side of the building and not on the right. This is kind of strange. Maybe it was planned. It was by design. I don't know. But it did happen before the present day fashion of bringing nature upwards on the walls of our buildings. You remember that picture with the statue, the sculpture? In plan, it would be here. We saw one stair leading to, you know, this whole way, and you know, with the 3 apartments or four apartments, and the same on the other side. Idiosyncratic building in a way. The Krier era in Vienna, an evening with Rob Krier. I will read this. The Luxembourg architect and sculptor Rob Krier, born in 1938 on the 10th of June, professor at Vienna University of Technology since 1976, brought a romantic variation of the postmodern discussion on urban development to Vienna, with his designs based on the striking imagery, studies, and publications. Krier has influenced a whole generation of architecture students without resorting to the creation of anything approaching a formal school. What he taught, the experiences gleaned by his former students, and the so-called lessons they learned in their time with him are the topic of this evening. This was a gathering. A brief talk by the architect, who currently lives in Berlin, and is followed by a panel discussion with his former fellow campaigners from his time in Vienna, to bring along some insufficiently appraised epoch in the history of architecture into the present. May contain traces of nostalgia. Indeed, may contain, and I think it did contain, traces of nostalgia. But nostalgia maybe is not just negative and bad. Maybe, you know, some traces of nostalgia are okay. Maybe. I'm thinking now of the great film by the great Andrei Tarkovsky called just that, Nostalgia, made in Italy, a great building. So Rob Krier, Viviendas Camilo Sitteplatz, this is in Vienna. It's kind of interesting that him and Joseph Kuipers were born on the same day. And this could have been almost done by Joseph Kuipers at the end of the 19th century or early 20th century. But it was built, you know, a good number of years later by Rob Krier in Vienna. I don't know what this thing is here. You know, it reminds me a little bit of Adolf, not Adolf, sorry, of Aldo Rossi, but I don't know what it is. It's kind of strange. I don't think it is by Rob Krier. Anyway, Vienna, postmodern architecture, Rob Krier, Camilo Sitteplatz in Vienna. Again, I think his sculpture, and it looks almost like a self-portrait, doesn't it? Is more engaging somehow than the buildings. So we are talking about this, I guess. I don't think he did all these buildings. Maybe he did. I don't know. But this one is by him, where the blue dot is. And we see the circular courtyard. Rob Krier. These great cities, Berlin, Vienna, are open to the new, even if the new is actually a reenactment of the old. but open to experiments, invite significant architects to build there, although they have their own important architects. This is to be appreciated. This is a building in Stuttgart. I don't think I spelled quite correctly Stuttgart. I think it needs a double T. The second T should be double. Rob Krier. Just a second here. Yeah. House Weidemann. I value this work maybe more than all other buildings built by Rob Krier, and I will explain why. It's a private home. It's not an apartment building. Here we have some preliminary studies, but actually the built work is much more fresh because it gives up historicisms. Here is still present, but here in the built work, or maybe this is, sorry, just a second. I guess I was wrong. I forgot when I made this presentation. Actually, this image, which I like from this building, is another house. It's the Zimmer house, also in Germany, but not in Stuttgart. In Stuttgart, I think he didn't build this building. Yeah, it remained, a project, drawn and in model, but was not built. So this work in Stuttgart, Haus Weidemann, was not built by Rob Krier, but he did build maybe around that time also this building in Warnbronn in Germany, 1968. The Zimmer house, and maybe this year, 1968, was conducive to the new more than the following years, because in the 1968 everybody knew the students protested against the war. They wanted to change the world. It was a revolutionary time, and this house, the Zimmer house that Rob Krier built, the drawing still has nostalgia, yes, but the building is much more modern and fresh than the drawings suggest. And this is the building. I like it because there are no historicisms here. There is no, falling into a sweetness which could be could pave the way towards that saying, to caress a cat to death. We don't want to die being caressed by excessive nostalgia and historicisms. That's the whole thing. The plans, maybe with their symmetry, do not actually suggest very well what happens in the reality of the build work. And I regret I should have had more images with this building, because I think if Rob Krier would have avoided historicisms, he would have been a better architect. But with the exception of this house, I don't know if he ever achieved this. Now, this is another house in Luxembourg. No, this one too, and also done around the same time, 1968. This architecture by Rob Krier I admire, even by today's standards, and again, because it doesn't employ obvious and bothering historicisms. Although we know that his drawings, are, nostalgic, melancholy even, but both this building and this building in Luxembourg, the previous one was in Germany, I think have a freshness which I wish he would have continued to have, but to my knowledge, he didn't. And we are going to see a few other buildings by him. This building reminds one of the drawing I showed earlier. It may be the very first drawing by him that I showed at the beginning of the presentation. The level of abstraction is higher here. So this was actually built 6 years later. The building in Germany was built in 1968. This one in 1974. I think at this time, Rob Krier was at his best. From this side, maybe the building is, but even from this side, from this angle, the building is it's kind of interesting. And I don't know if it's still inhabited by the person who commissioned it or not. It's a study in deforming the cube, in essence. Well, similar buildings in a way were done also by Mario Botta at the time in Switzerland. Interesting that column there, with round column. Is it really structural? Because it doesn't seem to be online with the, there is nothing solid here nor here. So, the traditional architect would imagine some beams here, and you wonder what's going on here. Maybe it's just more like you would expect this column to be, more impressive in its size, but it happens this here in this corner. This one, I don't know if it's structural or not. A strange, in a way, a strange round column right there. And I'm not even sure it's right in the center. It seems to be a little bit off, not quite in the center of the square. I wonder what its meaning is. Rob Krier, looks so good. Yeah, this is the house, but it had a different name, or now it has a different name. I guess it's a different inhabitant. I particularly like this picture with, although it's a small resolution picture, but I like the drama of the earth, and then the white cube emerging from this tormented earth. We saw already I don't know if we saw this level of the house, probably not. An interesting idea, maybe nothing very important, but you see, when you have a stair incorporated in a cubical structure or a square plan or whatever, because it represents a movement upwards or downwards, meaning a vertical movement as opposed to the horizontal movement on the plans themselves. To differentiate it a little bit, like he did here, is not a bad idea. It's not only the roundness that comes from how the stair was conceived, but also to take it out a little bit of the limit of the square or the cube, to create also a little window here. So the stair announces an architectural event within within the house, and it's important, I think, to express somehow the to differentiate between the vertical movement and the horizontal movement, even beyond the explicit differentiation which comes from showing the ramps and the, you know, which formulate the stair. Now, I don't know if he did these, you know, Albertian studies, or they were done by other people. It seems a little bit pretentious, you know, an academic exercise in, you know, esotericism. But I don't know. I don't know if it's truly needed something like this for this building. Now, what is this? It's a large complex of buildings in the Netherlands. You know, you wonder, you know, why did the Dutch build something like this when they had the incredible School of Amsterdam? Well, early, of course. What I'm saying, the tradition of architecture that manifests itself so brilliantly through the School of Amsterdam, not to mention its opposite movement, the Stel. It was the time, you know, in the 80s, postmodernism, sweet architecture. It doesn't impress me. I'm not a fan of this kind of architecture, which has nothing rebellious about it. I'm sure there are comfortable apartments there, but it's too placid, too conformist for my taste, at least. But I like the nature here, which is allowed to be itself, meaning wild. That's a great idea, but I don't know if it was the decision of the architect. Here he reminds me a lot of his brother, Leon Krier, Arcadian architecture. Bad. Rob Krier, Britman architects in Bilbao, Spain. Well, I almost feel like saying that I like more the building on the right than the building by Rob Krier, which is this one. But Bilbao, a city of contradictions and extremes. Bilbao also has the Guggenheim Museum by Frank Gehry. So I don't know, this kind of bombastic architecture, and I call it bombastic, doesn't impress me a lot. I think Rob Krier could have done better. Those two houses that we saw in Germany and in Luxembourg, in my opinion, were his best architecture, best built architecture. If this was done by Joseph Kuipers in the Netherlands, he probably would have done a more convincing job, although maybe not, you know, radically different from what we see here. But this one seems contrived and even fake somehow, you know, because it is an architecture which doesn't say anything about the technology of our time, doesn't say anything about the cars, the highways. It's an unconvincing nostalgia, and this is you know, called the neoclassical. I would rather do without, but there are some good things, you know, like these bow windows. But again, historicism is not very convincing, and is not very convincing in his case either. Although there is a collage of some, I mean, again, from all this whole building, I kind of like these bow windows. But otherwise, you know, what do they have in common with this? It's really like a collage of architectural elements borrowed from various so-called styles. No, he didn't integrate them. They are not convincing. I'm sorry, Mr. Rob Krier, but I like the work of Joseph Kuipers, also born on the 10th of June, but I'm not convinced about the historicism of this of this building built by Rob Krier, and I'm rather sad that he built it. But this part I do like. But you know, you cannot say about a building, I like this part, but I don't like other parts, and I don't like it as a whole. He could have explored this in a modern key somehow, and it's really a collage. It's an eclectic architecture. What does this triangle here do? You know, why is it here? I don't think he could have answered. Historicism was problematic, and in my opinion still is. And then, you know, his self-portrait, I would guess, almost, you know, planted on the facade of the building. That's it. Let's wish him happy birthday, and let's have a short discussion, if you don't mind.